Everybody, this is Brett Ingram, and this is the optYOUmize podcast, the show that helps entrepreneurs build their dream business and dream life. Today, we're talking with Ken Cox, entrepreneur, president of River City Internet Group, author of Reclaim Sobriety, 12 Rounds of Sobriety, and host of the Clicks and Bricks podcast. I'm super excited about this because I'm a big believer in overcoming obstacles as part of the success journey. And he's a walking testament to that. So, with that, welcome, Ken, and thanks a lot for joining us.
Brett, thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Absolutely. It's great to have you on. So, I know that you're going to share some amazing tips and some really good information with us, but I actually have to start with your background. I have a lot of questions I want to ask, but in starting with your background, you've come from struggling with addiction to achieving all this success. Can you share with us a little bit about your journey in terms of how you were able to do that?
Yeah, so I grew up in what I would call rough and tumble area in life and time, right? But one thing that, as a very young man, it was obvious school was not my my place to be. So I was part of the special school district. Um, so I had some liberties that would not have been afforded to me otherwise, right? And especially in the time frame, they didn't really understand any kind of neurodivergency, and I'm dyslexic with some other probably undiagnosed things. But so they put me in this special school district, which meant at the age of 12, my mom got to write me a note that got me out of school early, and I could go to the local restaurant and bus tables at as young as 11, right? So
Wow.
I had a lot of problems, but now I find myself at a local restaurant working with the owner directly at 11 years old, teaches me how to bus tables and do all these things. What I found as I reflected was that was a pretty consistent theme throughout my childhood. From 11 to 16, I would go through, and there's, four businessmen that kind of put me under their wing, right? There's the restaurant, the pool hall, the slot car guy, and, pizza place in town that I would kind of just harass these guys nonstop, and they would help me learn how to do business, and they would teach me stuff, and they'd give me side hustles to do inside their businesses, right? If they didn't give me a W-2 job, they would teach me how to do some little side hustle. Slot car machine was, cleaning slot cars and soldering stuff for the older guys that couldn't do it. And that just solidified in me the ability or the mindset that I can, carve my own path for my own financial success.
It's great. And also, I think it's really important, and I see this theme come up again and again. Sometimes, if we're in a situation where maybe we have a lot of disadvantages, but there's somebody out there who will invest a little bit in us, believe a little bit in us, and give us an opportunity, it not only gives us sort of the wings in the moment, but it also, in general, I think, impacts our character in a way where we want to then pay it forward because we can look back, reflect, and recognize the value that that meant to us and how formative that is, And so I know even in my own life, and my story doesn't compare to yours, but I know even in my own life, when I've had those little circumstances, whether it was a coach or whether it was a scout leader or whatever else, when there was somebody who believed in me enough to expect good things out of me instead of whatever, you're just another kid who's gonna like do whatever, then it made me want to be better. It made me want to perform at a higher level, and I think that's a really important thing. So while none of us really like to struggle, right, and obviously when we approach problems with the right mindset, I do think that, we can overcome issues, but actually also have that make us stronger in the process. Do you think that the struggles that you went through, even as a child, helped shape who you become?
100%. And, I think we don't wish for trouble or struggle, but and consciously we definitely don't seek it. But subconsciously, I think a human can get in a position to where they just believe they're that kind of person, and they continually put themselves behind the eight ball, just completely not even thinking about it, just because that's the way they're used to living. There's One of my mentors had a saying, and it's not a great saying, but it's cute and it puts the point down, is the best thing about waiting to the last minute to get something done is that it only takes you a minute to do it. It's testament to that pressure of, oh, I have to do this now. And, growing up in a position to where, if I wanted anything extra in life, right? Anything extra, I had to figure out how to get it. And I didn't grow up in a mindset of, oh, I need somebody to get that for me. It was very clear to me that with a little bit of effort, I could get a drastically more amount of the things that I wanted, right? At the time, it was like cooler tennis shoes and better concert t-shirts and stuff like that. But, as you grow and as an entrepreneur now, you're looking at something, it's not about, oh, shucks, I can't have that. It's like, that's what I need. That's what I want, or that's going to help me get to the next level. How do I get that into my bucket of resources? And I think growing up with challenges gives you that mindset, and you can't see it any other way.
Yeah, and that's really powerful because ultimately, when we believe that we have control over, at least to some extent, over what we're able to do or accomplish or getting what we want, it's a very different mindset than waiting for somebody to give us permission or waiting for somebody to give us the keys to the car or the path to go on. And I think that, there's a lot of value in that because there's dignity in work, there's dignity in struggle, there's dignity in effort. And all of those things are not only character building, but they add meaning and value to life. I think while sometimes it's easy to fantasize about having everything be easy for us, I also think it makes it more difficult, right? Because the things that we get in life that we had to work our tail off to get, in general, we're going to appreciate them a lot more because of the struggle that we had to go through to get there. And I think the stuff that comes easy to us, I mean, I've seen this even in the realm of athletics, right? I remember growing up, and I was not the most athletic kid, but I was athletic enough that I could compete at least. But there were kids that just had all this natural ability and they always took it for granted. And then the kids that were a little bit smaller, they had to work harder get in the weight room younger, right? Because they had to get stronger. The kids that were naturally bigger and stronger, they didn't even need to bother. The kids that were really fast, they could just run by guys on the field. The kids who weren't had to train speed, agility, all these other things. And I think that you appreciate it more and you're more likely to do more with it when you have to go through that. So in terms of for you, I know one of the struggles you went through, and if you don't mind talking about it, I know you had an issue with alcoholism, right? So when did that start? How did that come about, and what did you do to overcome that?
Wow. That's a lifelong question for me.
Yeah.
Alcohol becomes part of my life instantly. Like literally coming home from the hospital, my mom was homeless, raised some money, ended up living at the bar that my cousin owned when I came home from the hospital. That's where I lived. Um, and then I didn't have a father. So for the first 2 years of my life, it was me and my mom in a bar. And
Wow.
so I, slept in the crib in the back, and she bartended, and that's the way that it was. Obviously, I don't have any recollection of those times, but then she met my stepfather, who is, a union baker, good old boy. I put in my 8. I pour concrete on the weekend, and after my 8's done, I drink beer in the driveway. Um, so, I've been drinking since I can remember. My first run-in with AA, I was 13. I can recall as young as 10 years old, taking vodka and throwing it in the Kool-Aid on my way to school.
Wow.
Missed my first day of school in second grade because I was just too drunk to go. And so AA was my first time. I got in a lot of trouble at 13. Um, right after the adoption, the name change happened when I was 13 as well. So my name changed from Kenny Schneider to Kenny Cox at 13. And I got in a lot of trouble. I was found in a stolen car, and we had a lot of marijuana, and we were all pretty drunk. So that led to something that in the 80s they called tough love. And so I was in that program and AA, and it was was interesting. So I was under DYS, or Division of Youth Services, custody from 13 to 18. I got to live with my
Mm.
parents and all that stuff, but I was, probation, check-ins, all those things. Fast forward to my 20s, after 18, I was free man again. I didn't have to talk to anybody, nothing court ordered any longer. So kind of just free world to do whatever I wanted to do. And in my early 20s, drugs and alcohol were the people that could get them and do them in mass quantities were rewarded in remarkable ways, right?
Yeah.
I got to tour the country with musicians, in my early 20s, and then I moved into IT in 1999. So I left the entertainment industry, broadcasting, filmmaking, music, stage management. In 99, I went into IT. Almost instantly, I become a sales engineer, and I'm out with clients and happy hours nonstop. Again, drastically rewarded for my ability to drink copious amounts of alcohol and cater to all of these executives and have these parties and go back to back, client to client to client. So that just continued to compound, and it was for me, and I assume this is a lot the way for a lot of people. It was just okay. Ken's an alcohol.
Yeah.
Like it was my identity of who I was. It was not this thing that I did. It was part of who I was as a human, and for me, that was the hardest thing to change at the end, right? So instantly when you get, I got a diagnosis of liver disease. The doc told me, it's like, you can quit now or be dead in 2 years. Like that's kind of but if you quit now, you can have a full recovery. And that started, about a 10-year kind of journey on quitting. So at first it was like, oh, I can do anything, right? Like just tough it up and run. And then, through life, and you learn a lot about your neurological makeup in your brain as you're studying these things. And you develop a ton of tools to help you cope with it. But what I found the trigger for me, and I hope this is for a lot of people, identifying as an alcoholic or identifying as I have this problem kept me in this consistent recovery mode. And I was just never, I was always angry at it. Like it was still, the only feeling that I can even equate to it in my entire life is not having a father growing up, right? Now I've got this best friend that's with me my whole life, helped me cope through anything. I can't play with it anymore. It's gone. It's not part of my life. Until I stopped identifying as that person, it was a pretty challenging existence. But as soon as I started identifying as a sober person, I could say that with pride and with my head held high, all of those other triggers kind of just melted away. And bad feelings, like the whole thing was just night and day difference.
That's amazing. I do think the way that we look at things and the way that we associate or consider ourselves does make a big difference. As I sort of mentioned in the very beginning, right? When we have somebody else in our lives that expects a certain thing from us, then that can have an impact. But we also have a responsibility to hold ourselves to whatever standard or be whatever person that we want to be, and be able to go through life that way as well. So I think that's an amazing shift and a really powerful story, because you can see that if you then stop identifying as this person who's struggling with this and instead view yourself as the person who's already overcome it, you're past it, it changes the whole paradigm with the way that you approach things. Because look, I mean, let's be honest, alcoholism is a really tough one because it's everywhere and it is socially acceptable. And in fact, like you said, rewarded in a lot of cases, in a lot of contexts. You know what I mean? If I've been out with my wife and we're just out hanging out with friends or whatever else, and everybody's having a drink, and there's that inherent pressure to want to have one. I don't have an issue with it, but the thing of it is, if I know I'm going to drive, or if I'm kind of tired already, if I have a drink, it's just going to make me tired. So I'll at that point try to say no. And but I almost feel as though people look at me weird because you know what I mean. I said, oh no, I'm good. I'm just going to have a soda, or whatever else. And it is interesting because I think that makes it really, really challenging from that perspective as well. But I mean, good for you and congratulations on that, first off, because I know it's not an easy thing to deal with. And the fact that you've been able to sort of make that shift is something you should be super proud of. And I think it's amazing. So, if someone is listening and they're currently going through struggles or problems of any sort, what advice can you share about how to turn dark moments in their lives into something that can be a powerful lesson or something that can empower them to become someone better than where they feel they are at the present moment?
Yeah, there's a ton of tools that you can use. I think one thing that and I don't coach a lot of people at all, and it's not my like the coaching in this realm is not my favorite thing. I have other things that I really really enjoy doing, but one of the things that I would do if I coach a client and I have a couple of these people is I require, if I'm going to work with you at all, you have to engage in some type of meditation practice. And I just believe that if you cannot, take that 5 minutes a day for yourself to reflect and, focus on your breath and try to just, be a minimal movement as possible, both mind and body. Just wildly magical things can happen in those moments, and it's the start of being able to get to the points where you can take the conscious thoughts in your mind and start to embed them to where you do them subconsciously. And that meditation process is where it's at. And, if you're there, great. I had to, I did a lot of sessions at EMDR before I could get to that state to where I could meditate regularly. And I had a lot of things that I had to overcome. And for those that don't know it, EMDR is, it's a therapy with your eye movement, but it helps you reprocess old emotional wounds, right? So if you suffer from alcoholism, one of the things that you've done is you've never built the tool set to deal with any of your emotions, right? We used to joke around that I only had two emotions: super happy and super pissed. That was it, right? And that was true. It's the only two things that I ever learned how to deal with, because everything else was taken care of for me. I didn't have to build those tools. So meditation is, I think, a significant portion of what you need, and that self-reflection that I think helps a human get to the ability for self-love. It's a requirement to do this and do it well,
Yeah.
and the ability to know that it's on them to move forward, and that they have the ability, right? And those are key components to this game.
It's great. Yeah, I think that's, really important and powerful as well. I believe in having time to yourself where you don't have external stimulus regardless, because I think spending time with ourselves is just a really important and healthy activity, especially nowadays. I mean, I remember growing up and being told while I was growing up, and this is still predates the internet, that, at that point, I think we were exposed to 10 times the information in a day that our grandparents were in a year or something like that. By now, it's got to be like a gazillion times. So there's constant bombardment everywhere of stuff. And there's also easy access. Now you have, wireless headphones, you have this. So everywhere you go, you can constantly be stimulated by something external. And I think it's super important to unplug sometimes and just have that time to reflect, have that time to think about things and recognize what's important to us and who we are as people. I really do. I think we do exist, and I don't remember who said it, but we do sort of exist in the space between the thoughts, right? So might have been a Deepak Chopra quote or something like that. But I always liked it because I always believe that, sometimes in that silence, that's where we find ourselves. And so I think that's great advice. So being an entrepreneur can obviously be one of the toughest and most pressure-packed career paths any of us can undertake. And that comes from two sides, right? The pure business side, because business is tough in and of itself, but also the emotional and psychological elements of that, because we put ourselves into it. So it's personal. When we start a business, it's like, bad metaphor, but it's like our baby. And in some ways, it's hard to separate ourselves from our business. And so what advice do you have for how people can manage the stress of running a business while they're dealing with all of life's other challenges? Because you've certainly done that. So, what tips can you give us on that?
And I think that everybody's got to find their own way, right? So, who I think I'm talking to is the high functioning person that is, executing at an extremely high level. Um, One, it's make sure that you're doing what you love to do, right? So all the meditation practices, all those things, yes. Um, what I urge, young entrepreneurs specifically is that, stay away from the drugs and alcohol. I know happy hours close deals. I know it. I know after hours close even bigger deals, right? But long term, setting that precedent with your clients and that kind of world will do damage to you. So try, be conscious of that and don't do it back to back nights for very, very long, or at all if you can avoid it. Um, Having something in your life that you do for free, right? So one of the things that helped me tremendously, especially in the early days and throughout the entire process, um, I found when I got my diagnosis, I went and I found a boxing gym, and I started at that boxing gym, and I had, you know, um, I've been in and out of a little bit of trouble my whole life, but in 1999 to early 2000s, I got in some IRS trouble. I didn't know how to pay taxes on my first entertainment businesses, so I owed them a lot of money, so I started bartending. Um, so I did that for a very long time. Um, and in the bars, I had to fight a lot, right? So that gave me that. So, but I never competed in boxing. I knew that I liked fighting, but I never had a structure to it. So I find this boxing gym. I start going there. The very first day I came home, and this is probably a week after my liver disease diagnosis. I was probably 310 pounds at the time, really bad shape, like really, really struggling with life. And I didn't make it through the whole hour of the class. And I got home and I told my wife, I remember telling her exactly, I'm like, if I can do that once a day, then I can do anything. Like there's nothing in
Yeah.
the world that I can't do. And I couldn't do that for an hour then, I can now. Uh, I could do anything. So it became pretty obvious to me that gym was not going to stay open. And I learned a lot about boxing gyms because my day job, I operate data centers and I build websites for companies, all kinds, right? Small companies, big companies, doesn't matter. So I understood multiple different kinds of businesses, and I knew how to operate this because I had helped people build their websites and do those kinds of things. And I could tell this one was not going to make it. So I reached out to the owner and talked to them, and I was right. It wasn't, for a lot of reasons. So why don't you sell it to me and we'll figure this out, because I can't not have it, right? I can't not have this, because if I don't have this, I'm gonna die. Like I have zero doubt in my mind that this is the thing right now that's keeping me from doing anything else, because I can go there for the hour and then I have nothing left for the rest of the day, right? If I'm there at 6:30 p.m., when I leave at 7:30 p.m., there's nothing left in my tank for the rest of the day. I'm dead. So bought the gym, rebranded it, and then that has given me this little gym has given me all these different tools throughout the time. And then really what changed it for me was that I started coaching a youth boxing team. Re- not wanting to, kicking the kids out constantly like a TV show, right? Kids knocking on my door, teach me to box. I'm like, leave, kid. I don't know how to do that. Uh,
It
finally
is
give
like a
in.
movie, yeah.
Yeah, finally give in. I'm like, screw it, show up on Saturday. And then, we have this youth team, and I had to figure out, and this is really where things significantly start changing for me, kind of from, okay, I'm sober, but I'm kind of grumpy and I'm not happy about it, and I'm still pissed about it, and I can't go to restaurants. I can't sit at a bar and order anything without, having panic attacks. Um, so I started coaching these kids, and I had to bring them from, this weird, awkward 12-year-old that we all are. And they want to compete in the ring. And I had to figure out how to get them the mindset to do that. And I, I took a ton of classes, which helped me in business, and it has helped me in everything, every single thing that I do. Was learning how to coach these kids. And so if you can find something that you love to do and you're giving back and somebody else is accountable for you, I think that's a secret sauce recipe to just take the wheels off of any train and make it fly.
Yeah, that I mean that's really powerful when you have a purpose, when you have something that you think is important and you feel you don't want to let them down either. So you're doing all these things, but it's sort of you're also growing through the process, even if it's accidentally, you know? So I
Yeah,
think
I think there's very few times in life where your passion and your purpose kind of coincide and have a crossroads. And when they do, um, hold on to that, because that's pretty special time, right? And you're not
yeah.
going to have it forever. It's fleeting, right? So just enjoy it and appreciate the heck out of it, and move forward.
That's terrific. That's really awesome. So I know another big fear that a lot of entrepreneurs have is fear of failure, right? We get started in something, but we're a little worried about taking risks because we know the minute that we start a business, essentially we're putting ourselves out there. You get a job, you lose the job, whatever. You could blame the employer, you can, whatever it is. But when you start a business, that's sort of your own thing. So how did your experiences, both good and bad, change your perspective about the way you see failure and success?
Yes. I think in entrepreneurship, you get to a point, at least I have, where you understand it at such an intimate level. There's a ton of people out there that think, oh, I have this product, I can kick up an Etsy shop, I can do a website, and it's going to start selling, right? And there's a couple of times that has happened, right? In the late 90s, early 2000s, that was possible. It's not possible today. It is possible today, highly unlikely, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have to do a lot of work, and it might be 2 or 3 years before your dream becomes a fruition. And I think for a lot of people that are trying these things, they need to give themselves 2 or 3 years really of trying this game out. Understand that you're tasting. Do you like doing this or not? Right? I think a lot of people like, oh, I think I would love selling this widget. And when they get in the weeds of accounting and HR and manufacturing, and you're like, I really don't like this. And I think giving yourself the permission to say, I really don't like this. I'm either going to hire somebody to do this for me because I've made it profitable, or I'm not going to do this anymore. And let your customers down in the best way possible. Give them plenty of time to scale down and find other solutions for whatever product or service that you're offering. And that's okay, right? That's what this is. It's finding the thing that you love to do so much that you would do it for free, because some days you might might have to do that,
Yeah.
right? Because as the entrepreneur, you are absolutely the last one that gets paid, right? You're the
Yeah,
last
no
one
doubt about that. Yeah.
100% of the time. When
Yeah.
payrolls, when the bank's not 100% there, and you're like, man, what do I cut? And it's like, well, at some days that's going to be your payroll, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, I just, the don't do what you love and you never work a day in your life is so cliche. And I just, in this game, if you're not doing what you love, you're gonna struggle. Like, it's gonna be such an uphill battle, and probably fail. Like,
Yeah.
if you don't love it, or have some kind of weird drive to do it, something that you don't love, it's you're gonna run into a moment where it's just easier to quit than it is to keep going. Um, and I talk to my kids a lot about the difference between quitting and giving up, right? And
Yeah.
quitting is like, I don't like doing this anymore, and that's okay. And figuring out an exit strategy for it, right? Whereas
Right.
just giving up is walking away, locking the doors, and I've done that too um, in my life, right? I've just shut the doors and walked away for a little while. So, um, giving yourself permission to understand that you're on a journey, and it's hard. It is really hard to go from an idea in your head to a tangible product or service that you're offering for somebody and get them to give you money for it and then execute on it and figure out how to scale that. Um, it is a puzzle,
And
but
I
it's
love,
getting easier every single
yeah,
day. It's
but
getting easier.
I love the perspective of giving yourself permission also to pivot when you recognize, because I think that's the other part of it. We get involved in something and we feel like, well, we started this, so now we're stuck with it. But it's true that if it isn't your passion, it's such a struggle that you're just going to end up resenting it and hating it anyway. It's going to be hard to be good at it because somebody loves what you're doing, and that's your competition. So if you don't, I recognize that in my work career. I was in staffing for 5 years. And I'll never forget the day I realized it wasn't the career for me because I was okay at it. It wasn't great, but I'm personable enough. I know, I'm not afraid of making cold calls and doing those kinds of things. But I came into the office and the owner of the company, I worked for a small company, she was just over the moon about this candidate that she had talked to. It wasn't about the commission. It wasn't about how much money she was going to make. She had been in the office 2 hours late last night talking to this woman, 2 hours on the phone, trying to convince her that this other opportunity was going to be better for her because she just knew in her career to align herself with this company for where this lady wanted to go. And it was 100% out of the passion for helping this woman be in the best career path as possible. Had nothing to do with the money she was going to make. And I looked at her, and even though she was my boss and I worked for her at the time, I'm thinking to myself, that's what I'm competing against. Because there are people that feel that way about this business, and I don't. For me, it's a job. So I
Right.
knew, right, that I could survive in it for a while, but I was never going to be great at that. And when it's a business, if you're not great, usually you're dying. So that's really, I think, sage advice. I'm a big believer in mentorship. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. And in fact, it's literally the reason I started this podcast because as a 17-year entrepreneur myself, I did a lot of it sort of in a solo capacity, outsourcing things like that. But I didn't really have any mentors or anything like that. So I want to be the mentor for other people that I never had. What role did mentorship and community support play in your recovery and in your business journey? And how can other people leverage that when they're, facing challenges or they want to do something?
Right. So in life and business, it's helped tremendously, right? I talked about these business owners when I was a very young man, going through, uh, outside of high school, I went to a school called Broadcast Center, and I really wanted to do broadcasting. Ended up not being the career choice that I went for most of my life, although I'm kind of getting back into that world now, over 25 years later. Um, I One of my mentors, Steve, passed away in 2017, which was really, really challenging for me. Um, was he was a co-founder of the company that I am the president of now, and we worked really, really close together for several years. He was a retired school teacher, um, cashed in his pension early to invest in the company that we're starting, right? All of these things, and he was just a great friend for a very long time, and somebody that I could talk to and give me advice from an older person's perspective, which was um, I can't put a price tag on that, right? And I've had other mentors throughout my life, even last 5 or 10 years, right? And the joke that I kind of make under the not very public joke, is that they don't have to agree to be my mentor to be my mentor, right? I could just I can just start hanging out with people. I can start absorbing their content. I can all of these things, and we live in such a really weird world, um, to where we have these great people that are creating content for us that we get to consume for free, pretty much, right? Just our time and maybe watch an ad here and there. We have that today that we didn't have before. So I think it's such a really cool and exciting time in tech, um, and entertainment, and the whole, like, this weird collision that, yes, mentorship is wildly important, but if you can't find that one-on-one, you know, you can definitely make a YouTube channel that provides you the content that you need to help motivate you and grow, um, in ways that just weren't available even 5, 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
This new kind of entertainment world that we're going into, can be wildly powerful if you
Yeah.
curate your content properly.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and I think that's so true. You know, as long as we know what we want or what we need, it's you can find it. I mean, nowadays, and you
Yes.
can create it, which is awesome. I love how that's really been democratized. There aren't just a small handful of people that hold the, that are gatekeepers for all the important, uh, venues in life and career paths now. There's a lot of different ways to get to where you want to go. So, all right. So I know you have a podcast. You've written a book. Where can people find you, find your products, connect with you?
Yeah. The easiest way to find me is very simple, just kencox.com. That's kind of an aggregation point for all the things that I do, my boxing school, my books. I've got, a book that was released, actually the first week of October, with Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank. We wrote Many Paths to Profit together. That's on the shelves today. And then Reclaim Sobriety is my personal story, and an effort to kind of lift the veil for a lot of people and give them a lot of tools and strategies to, um, change their mindset and their relationship with, the problems that they're having.
It's awesome. And are you on LinkedIn as well, or are there other places people can find you? Or
Absolutely. Ken Cox is, I mean, if you Google Ken Cox entrepreneur, you'll find me more exclusively, but, I've been able to dominate most of the Google with just my name. There's a lot of us out there, with my name. It's a short, easy one, but, kencox.com is the easiest way to find me. On LinkedIn, I'm also just Ken Cox. And from there, it's just kind of spread out all over the place. And, I don't follow the rules of the average marketing guy. I kind of step back and say, I don't have to fit into one niche and be all about one thing. And I think that we're living in a time that's more and more acceptable every day, that you can just come to the table being you, and create a persona of, the different things that you like, and people can appreciate that. And, instead of, kind of narrowing yourself down. I think that's another thing that entrepreneurs are afraid of is, well, I don't want this thing to be everything that I am. And a lot of marketers will say that's what you have to do. And, it is a strategy, and it does work for a lot of people, but it doesn't work for everybody.
yeah,
Right. So,
I'm with you there. I think the authenticity element is far more important than trying to fit in any particular box, because that's what people relate to. People relate to other people, stories that people have, and journeys they've been through. And so I think that I feel the same way. I think that while it's important to know what you're good at and what you enjoy, at the same time, it doesn't have to be singular. It doesn't have to just be the one thing. So I think that's great advice and perfect. Thanks a lot for that. So it's just about time to wrap things up. I want to thank you again, Ken, so much for sharing all your insights and great tips with us. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And remember, as always, no matter what you want to accomplish in your business and your life, don't compromise, optimize.